Welcome to The Better Life with Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston. Join Dr. Pinkston today as she teaches you how an integrative approach to health, combining holistic and contemporary medical information, can lead you to the better life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in to The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston. I am Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston. And as usual, I have the pick of the litter of fantastic guests, and today is no exception. So I have a good friend out in Florida, Dr. Anthony Capasso, who I have seen lecture many, many times and just recently have gotten to know through the American Academy of Anti-Aging and Medicine, A4M, which is a place where I have gotten a great education about integrative medicine and all the things I believe that are right and wonderful about medicine. Dr. Capasso is equally, if not more, passionate about medicine and the effects of the industry and the environment and everything on us. And so he has a great specialty in working with a little organelle called the mitochondria. So he's going to help us learn a little bit today about how to manage our energy and our ability to lose weight. I know, Dr. Capasso, you are Chief Medical Officer, I believe, of a weight loss center. Well, not weight loss center, but a clinic that focuses on health and weight out in Florida, Thin Centers MD. Welcome in. I'm so glad and honored to have you, as always.
Aaron, thank you so much for having me, and good morning.
Good morning. You're all bright and happy out there. Did you get your coffee this morning? I know you're an hour, I think, ahead of us, so I'm trying to catch up.
Yes, I did have my double espresso this morning. Thank you.
Good for you. Well, awesome. So I know for my crowd probably really don't know and understand what a mitochondria is. It could be, a baseball team for for what a lot of people know, but I think it's something very important that we need to understand for our energy and weight, et cetera. Give us an explanation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Most of us probably remember learning about it in high school biology, the mitochondria being the powerhouses of the cell, but they're really much more important than that. I kind of think of them as the brains of the cell because they're constantly sensing what's happening inside of every one of our cells. Mm-hmm. And what we know about mitochondria is that if they're healthy, we stay healthy. If they're not healthy, then, essentially every disease, including cancers, are associated with some form of mitochondrial dysfunction. But they're involved in calcium regulation. They're involved with hormone production, and they are involved with producing energy. And, the places that we burn our carbohydrates and our fats and our proteins down is the mitochondria, and the mitochondria take those macronutrients and they produce ATP, and that's our energy. So we have, our brain can think, we can move, our muscles can move. So that's kind of the main thing. And what we know is with mitochondria is when our mitochondria are not functioning well, then the system kind of slows down a little bit. And all age-related diseases essentially have some form of mitochondrial dysfunction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know if, when you say it kind of slows down, I think we all feel that in our energy when things, slow down. And, most people think of the brain, you say the brain of the cell, most people think of the brain of the cell as the nucleus, with all the DNA, and that's the powerhouse. But really, this guy is the most important, requires a special, set of nutrients and care in order to keep going and prevent all of these diseases.
Sure. And what a lot of people don't realize is mitochondria have their own set of DNA. Mm-hmm. And how the DNA functions and works definitely determines, again, how your cells will function and work. And it's interesting because, one of the questions that I always get asked is how is DNA related to weight loss? Mm-hmm. And the mitochondria, how's the mitochondria related to weight loss? Mm-hmm. And when the mitochondria, they're set up to produce energy, but if the cell's stressed, what happens is instead of producing energy, they focus all their efforts on, repairing the cell and making sure that the environment is safe. Mm-hmm. So any chronic inflammatory process like leaky gut or infections, what happens is that your mitochondria shift from making energy and burning the fat and all that stuff off that we need to focusing on our immune system and protecting us.
Right. And so you see that now with all of the assaults we receive. I mean, I think stress is one of the number one effects on our ability to, function well, sleep well, lose weight, things like that. The certain foods we eat, all the inflammation that we create, our bodies are focused on fixing all of those matters. And you see it more and more now. I know in San Antonio, I sat at the airport one afternoon. I thought, oh my gosh, this city is definitely earned its name of being, I think, the third fattest city in the nation. And it is amazing to me how I think our energy goes into that. If we are focused on, just trying to get up and go and feel better and accomplish our day, our even all the way down to the cellular level, our bodies are focused on that and not focused on what it should be doing, using our nutrients for to make proteins and things and hormones and things that it's supposed to make. We're just focused on just surviving, I think. And so is that one of the most, what do you think, I guess, is at the bottom of all of that for, people who are trying to get their energy back and lose weight and accomplish what they need to accomplish for their health?
Yeah, so you have to take a very comprehensive approach. And there are, as you mentioned, a lot of things that affect how our mitochondria work, right? Everything from your environments. What I call the SAD, standard American diet, can definitely injure your mitochondria, probably the most common over time because, refined sugars, high carbohydrate diets, when your mitochondria are breaking them down, they produce what we call reactive oxygen species. And these are basically oxidized things that injure the cell. Free radicals is another term that people may have heard of.
Yes.
So the diet plays a big role. Medications, if you're on a cholesterol lowering medicine, you're on blood pressure medicines, if you're on antidepressants, they all injure the mitochondria. Mm-hmm. So we've got medications to worry about. We have diet to worry about. Any chronic illness like diabetes, hypertension can do it. And then a lot of the environmental toxins, everything from pesticides to the plastics in our diet, the gasoline additives that we all get exposed to. Mm-hmm. They also play major. And then, as you mentioned before, stress, right? Poor sleep. There was an article that came out, which was really interesting in last year, that looked at the mitochondrial DNA, as I mentioned. And what it showed is that mitochondrial DNA is what we think is basically inherited on the mother side. But there's question about that right now. But what they found is during stressful situations is that mitochondrial DNA leaks out into the cell. And our cells look at that mitochondrial DNA as being foreign material, like a virus attacking. And so you get this really strong inflammatory response. Wow. And so the study looked at people that were actually giving a lecture. And then while they were giving the lecture, they, said some really inflammatory things about them in front of a big crowd. And then they measured these markers and it showed that, wow, these things get kicked out and it causes a lot of inflammation and injury. And so I know in medical school, I remember, they kind of hounded, well, stress doesn't cause diseases, but it makes it worse. And I would disagree.
Absolutely. I remember
stress 100% does this. Yeah. And it's amazing. One of the probably most common things that I see is poor sleep and how poor sleep really affects our hormones in our systems. Right. And there's 18 different hormones that get changed when we don't sleep, which can affect mitochondrial function, everything from cortisol to the hunger hormones like ghrelin and leptin and adiponectin. Right. And so, really working on some things to calm that, balance that system is the most important. And the other kind of bad thing is that, after the age of like 35, every year we lose about 8 to 10% of our mitochondria.
Wow.
However, you can reverse it. And that's the most important thing. And probably the strongest thing that reverses mitochondrial dysfunction is exercise. Wow. So when patients come, they say, well, doc, what can I do to really help improve? Mm-hmm. And the first thing I'd say, well, let's make sure that you're sleeping right. Right. Second thing I would say, let's make sure that you're eating the right diet, because we know high carb diets actually injure the mitochondria. We know low carb diets and fasting and intermittent, feeding is much better because the mitochondria need time to clear themselves out. So I'm a big fan of not eating late in the evenings, because every single study you look at that shows late time eating, it affects our kind of biorhythms, and it has to do with how the cells clean themselves out. So that's the autophagy, or if we're talking about, getting rid of bad mitochondria, that's called mitophagy. So those things are really, really important. So understanding, like, I can't eat all the time and expect my mitochondria to be functioning, because they're going to get sluggish and slow, and they're going to get injured.
Right.
And what we know about injured mitochondria is they'll recruit healthy cells or healthy mitochondria and make them injured. So
it'll kill everything off around it too.
Exactly. And, that's what we call those senescent cells, and the senescent cells kind of recoup the other healthy cells and kind of make them injured. So how do we get rid of that? And that's kind of our feeding cycles, right? So you should feed during certain times and not. So diet plays a big role with that. And then I would also, look at eliminating certain things that may be contributing to the injury. If it's a particular medication that you could, get off of potentially, those would be the 3 or 4 things that I tell my patients on a regular basis to help. And then also, there's a bunch of nutrients that can kind of trigger the production of new mitochondria. We call that mitochondrial biogenesis. Right. And that's kind of where, 25 years ago, I kind of fell into why I do functional medicine, more nutritional based medicine is, personally during residency, I was basically burning the candle at both ends and, ended up with gut issues, ended up with chronic fatigue, and I was just working way too much. And at that time, I didn't drink any espresso or coffee at all during medical school or residency, if you can believe that. And I was just looking for natural things that I could take that would kind of reboot my body. So, I just kind of did a deep dive into the literature, and I okay, what can make my cells work better? Right. And I started reading about mitochondria, and that's how I got kind of focused on this. And, I started reading, and there was 11 nutrients that kind of just popped up in a lot of the studies. So I started taking these 11 nutrients, and what I found was that I was much more energized. And the interesting thing is, during residency, because of the lack of sleep, because of the hours that we worked, I gained a little bit of weight. I would say maybe 10, 15 pounds more than I wanted to be. After taking these nutrients, what I found was, my weight just my metabolism came back to where I was 18 again, and I was back down, and I was I didn't change my diet. I ate pretty clean anyways, but I think it was just the stress, the lack of sleep that just, tore my body up. Right. And I realized, wow, I can take these nutrients, and this can kind of, make my body feel like it was, 10, 15 years earlier. And it's I wasn't taking a med. I'm well, this is the way medicine should be. Right? It
is, right?
Instead of give your body what it needs, understand what your body, give it what it needs. And lo and behold, it works. And so I started to formulate a product, and I formulated a product called Mitoblast, and I've been taking that for, over 15 years now. It's been great. And it's one of the products that I suggest all my patients that come into the office, especially that have any fatigue issues or age-related diseases, to get on, because all of us are constantly getting injury to our mitochondria just by daily living. And so you have to do something. And that's kind of how I got into, more of an integrative path in medicine.
So, there's with the 11 ingredients and maybe naming a few of them would be great, but, it's hard to find all of those ingredients in one thing. And the focus of my show is never to, push products on people, but the problem is, where do you find good products? So you have to find it through people like us who, have done all the research or formulated things or whatnot. And so is this something available to people that they can, through either find through my site or through you? Is this something that they can find?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the product is called Mitoblast 2. Mm-hmm. And you can go to the website's mitoblast.com. Okay. And the nutrients in there are combinations of nutrients in the clinical doses in the clinical studies. Right. And that's one of the things, when I was looking at like, how much do I need to take? I'm like, well, if this study said take, 600 milligrams, and I wanted to make sure there was 600 milligrams that I was taking.
Exactly.
And a lot of the supplements on the market don't do that. They'll kind of sprinkle a little bit in and then, look at those
a lot of
claims.
fillers too, right? And 600 milligrams of filler, not the product. So.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So, that's important to me. This is something that I take every day. So I want to make sure that I've got the best of the best in my product,
right.
So I can see the effect that I want to see.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. The quality of the products are the most important thing.
Absolutely. And so also dietary wise, and we're coming up on kind of our 2-minute break. So it might be, might behoove us to go to the other side with it. But, people do a lot of intermittent fasting and talk a lot about it, but I don't think people really understand it or how to do it correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, I generally tell my patients just try to stop eating around 7 o'clock at night and go till the next morning. And, when you get up, whenever it is, if you want to exercise before you eat or whatever, depending on your diabetes and your blood sugars and medications and things like that and your abilities. But, go ahead and exercise during the first part of the morning, have your breakfast. And that's essentially a form of intermittent fasting that's easier than, going these long hours. Or what do you usually recommend?
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And I do recommend that. So I usually tell my patients to cut dinner, their last meal after like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. And 12 to 16 hours, not a problem. And then exercise is interesting. So, exercising low is kind of what they call it, where you haven't eaten anything. There's more of a chance that you're going to burn those carbohydrate stores in our muscles called glycogen. And once those stores drop, then our body's kind of forced to look for fat to burn.
That's right.
Right. And so, it's important. So yeah, I think that's great. I think that's perfect. The other thing is really looking at the macronutrients, like, how much carbs are in your diet? Like, are you doing a lot of starches and sugars in your diet? Right. Because again, that can slow and injure that mitochondria and reduce your ability to lose weight effectively.
Right. Well, that is that a lot of people, ask a lot about carbohydrates and how to do it. Maybe that's something, like I say, on the flip side, we can talk about. We're going to take a short break. I want everybody to know, though, I'll have all this information for you on my website, and I'll have information about Dr. Capasso and how you can find him as well at drpbetterlife.com. We're going to take a short break and see you on the other side.
Fatty liver is linked to 2 different situations, alcohol and diabetes or obesity. In both cases, patients can have no symptoms. In the United States, and in particular, Texas, the most common cause of liver disease in general is non-alcoholic fatty liver. Again, associated with overweight, obesity, and or diabetes. Additional risk factors include high cholesterol, high blood pressure, Hispanic ethnicity, and postmenopausal status. At Pinnacle Clinical Research, we offer a quick, non-invasive ultrasound-based screening assessment called FibroScan. This test is done at no cost to you, and we do not take insurance. The test will measure the fat and stiffness in your liver and stage your risk and development of fatty liver disease. You will meet with a provider immediately following your scan to go over your results. If you're interested in getting more information on your liver health, please call 210-982-0320 and schedule your FibroScan today. We are conveniently located in the Medical Center at 5109 Medical Drive.
Welcome back. Dr. Pinkston here with Dr. Anthony Capasso out in sunny Florida. I guess you said it was raining a little bit, so I guess it's not so sunny right now, which is something we need for sure. But we have been talking about feeding our mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of our cells, and each and every one of our cells in our body that give us the energy to get up and get going or to burn fat, which is something we're all trying to do. So we talked a little bit about intermittent fasting, and then we kind of moved into carbohydrates a little bit, left off with that. And I think people are, and you probably see this all the time too, I think people are confused a little bit about carbohydrates. Most of the time, and I hear this 1,000 times a day, well, I started the keto diet and I lost a lot of weight. And keto, whatever that means to people is usually different. But generally they will go either no carb or extremely low carb. But if they do have a carb, they'll have a little bit of pasta rice or a piece of bread, not realizing that that's not the right type of carb. So how do you talk to your patients about carbohydrates and the 10 to 15 minutes that you would have to get that huge subject across?
Sure, not a problem. So carbs are important. I mean, I'm not a fan of completely eliminating carbohydrates. I think our body likes carbs at certain times and it doesn't like it at other times, right?
Right.
So you always have to look at the system first. If your system is such that you're already inflamed, you already have insulin resistance, any carbohydrate in your body is going to cause more problems because you're just turning on insulin. And insulin is a hormone that takes sugar from your bloodstream. It allows the sugar to get put into your muscles in a storage form called glycogen. And it also takes the fats that you eat and stores them in fat. So if you're insulin resistant, you have typically higher levels of insulin in your body. That's, even when you're not eating, the hormone's telling you, hey, store sugar in your muscles, store fat in your fat cells. So understanding that system is real important. But for carbohydrates, our bodies don't like the same thing of anything. It likes changes, right? And it likes it based on certain things. And one of the most important things for like improving mitochondria is having some form of a stress, whether it's exercise, and that helps to tell the body, hey, let's make more because our body's stressed, it needs more. But if you get above a certain stress level, it can affect it. And when it comes to carbohydrates, it's kind of the same thing. If you wake up and you've got sleep apnea, you've got sleep issues, your insulin and your cortisol may be high in the morning, that's going to affect it. So morning time may not be the best time for carbohydrates, but if you do your exercise, actually post-exercise is what I find to be the best.
Right.
So, how do I look at carbohydrates? If you're really active as we get older, we don't need as much carbohydrate. But if you're active, the best time to refuel is 30 to 40 minutes post-exercise with some carbohydrates and proteins. And the carbs actually will drive the proteins and those amino acids into the muscles for the repair. And I've done this with a lot of my patients. We'll do we'll do the finger stick sugars in the morning time. And then I'll have them, hey, let's do some low glycemic fruit like, blueberries or strawberries, have some and then check your sugar an hour later. Let's see what it is. Lo and behold, it's a little higher than we want it to be, maybe 150, 160. And then I said, okay, the next morning, what I want you to do is I want you to exercise, hold off on the fruit, and then eat the fruit after your exercise and then check your blood sugar after. And lo and behold, it's down to, under 100. So just that exercise itself can, make the sugar get absorbed much better. So those levels aren't as high. And the analogy I use is think of your muscles as a sponge after exercise. The sponge is kind of contracted. As soon as you put the sugar in, it just soaks up all that, all those carbohydrates from your bloodstream.
That's a great analogy.
And, what we find is that if your sugar in your bloodstream stays high over time, it attaches to proteins, and these proteins change, they become pro-inflammatory. And one of the big markers that we check in our diabetics is called the A1C.
Right.
And hemoglobin's a molecule, it's a protein that floats through the bloodstream, and the sugar's attached to it. And it's kind of a marker of kind of how much sugarization is going on. So keeping those carbohydrates lower is important because the mitochondria can clear themselves a little easier if it's not overloaded. And once you burn those carbohydrates down, you're able to burn fat much more efficiently.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well done. So that is, I usually tell my patients, if you can stay with your meals and your total over the day with your, macros, those are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. If you can stay kind of in the 20% area, but keep it with things like you said, low glycemic, and that's something else I can put on my website too about what the glycemic index is. But, keep it with things that are not, potatoes, corn, carrots, peas, breads, pastas, things like that, but keep it more on the line of, like you said, the berries and vegetables and things that are much more complex. Their sugar's not so free to just hit the bloodstream as pure sugar. And, keep it with that. You can still have your carbohydrates, still fuel your brain and your energy when you need it. Like you say, post-exercise or, in a busy day, you're on your feet all day, settle down late in the evening, don't have quite so many, focus more on protein and good sources of fat. And then, cut it off about that 7 o'clock hour after you've had dinner. And then, drink your fluids, whatever you need as you go to sleep. Go the next morning, get up, exercise, do it all over again. That is a great form of weight loss for people. And so I'm thrilled to hear that you advocate and do the same thing, as you're definitely thought leader and all of that. And that's wonderful to know. So we have hit that 2-minute mark, and I want to make sure that people know how to find you and any information that, is important to find you. Do you have a website or Facebook or something that is, people can
Sure.
look for you?
Yeah, so my website is ThinMedSpa.com. And you can leave a message for the office or call us at 904-694-0992.
Wonderful. And I know I will have all of that information again on my site at drpbetterlife.com. And that will also take you to for folks who are listening in San Antonio on radio, that will take you to the YouTube channel and all of the platforms for podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeart Radio. All of the platforms are there, so you can find me at drpbetterlife.com and therefore find Dr. Anthony Capasso, who I am so thankful joined me today. It is such a pleasure always to speak with you, and I'm honored to have you on. And hope you have a great day to finish off your week and go into the weekend. Anything fun?
Probably going to shoot some sporting clays this weekend. So
there you go. Well, whatever it takes, just get some rest. Enjoy it, please. Yeah. But thank you. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.